Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Shame is a powerful and often invisible force in our lives. For some people, especially those with narcissistic tendencies, it doesn't show up as quiet insecurity or self-doubt. Instead, it shows up as control, performance, and perfectionism, particularly in the most vulnerable and intimate spaces like the bedroom. When someone wears shame like armor, they might look bold, seductive, and confident. But what's happening underneath is something very different, a desperate attempt to avoid being truly seen. For narcissists, shame is not just an occasional feeling. It is a deeply rooted belief that they are unworthy of love unless they are exceptional, desirable, or in control. In sexual relationships, this often plays out through a carefully managed image. Sex becomes a stage where they perform rather than connect. The idea of simply being with another person, of letting down their guard and allowing intimacy to unfold naturally is terrifying. Vulnerability feels dangerous. If you get too close, you might see what they're working so hard to hide. Their deep fear of not being good enough, of not being lovable without the mask. In many ways, sex becomes their safest way to access something that looks like closeness without actually having to be vulnerable. The bedroom offers a chance to play a role, to be the skilled lover, the irresistible partner, the one in control. It's an environment they can shape and manage, unlike the unpredictable and messy world of emotional intimacy. But when sex is used to avoid vulnerability rather than express it, the result is disconnection. No matter how passionate or intense the experience, something is missing, something essential. There is no softness, no mutual risk, no honest surrender. The shame underneath this dynamic is rarely talked about because narcissists are skilled at hiding it, even from themselves. They may brag about their sexual prowess, use charm or flirtation as a tool for manipulation, or keep their partners in a state of confusion about what's real and what's performative. But if you watch closely, you'll notice patterns. They struggle with moments of true emotional openness. They may push for physical intimacy early in a relationship, but grow cold or dismissive once emotional depth begins to surface. They might avoid eye contact during sex, disconnect quickly afterward, or seek validation constantly without giving much in return. All of this points to a fear, not of sex itself, but of what it might expose. Because if sex becomes more than performance, if it becomes a space for vulnerability, it threatens the entire foundation of the persona they've built. It means letting go of control. It means being emotionally present. And it means confronting the shame they've been trying to outrun their whole lives. That's not something they're often willing to do because to them, shame is not just a feeling, it's an identity they are running from. And letting someone see their shame feels like a risk they might not survive. For the people who love them, this can be incredibly painful. You may feel that something's off, but you can't quite name it. You might blame yourself for the lack of connection or wonder why the relationship feels so emotionally distant despite physical closeness. It's disorienting, and without understanding the role shame plays in the narcissist's life, it's easy to take their behavior personally, but their inability to be truly intimate isn't about you. It's about their fear of being exposed. Healing from this kind of dynamic requires more than insight. It requires boundaries, self-trust, and often grief. You may grieve the intimacy you hoped for but never received. You may grieve the parts of yourself that contorted to keep the connection alive. And most of all, you may need to grieve the illusion that if you just loved them enough, they'd eventually let you in. That's the heartbreak of loving someone who wears shame as armor. No matter how much you offer, they cannot receive it unless they are willing to take that armor off themselves. True intimacy requires courage. It asks us to risk being seen in all our messy, imperfect humanity. It's not about performing or impressing, it's about showing up with our whole selves, even when it's uncomfortable. Until someone is ready to do that, their relationships will remain guarded, their connections shallow, and their sexuality more about escape than expression. Shame may protect them, but it also isolates them. And no amount of performance can fill the ache of never being truly known. Control can be one of the most seductive forces in a relationship. especially when it wears the mask of passion. In narcissistic dynamics, what often appears as intense desire, overwhelming chemistry, or irresistible charm is actually something much more calculated. It's not about love, closeness, or connection. It's about control. And because it's dressed in the language of romance and lust, it's easy to miss, especially in the beginning. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like you're wanted, desired, chosen. But over time, that passion starts to feel less like intimacy and more like ownership. In these relationships, sex becomes a powerful tool for domination. It's not about mutual pleasure or emotional connection. It's about asserting control, establishing power, and keeping you emotionally tethered. The narcissist may use intense sexual chemistry early on to hook their partner, creating an illusion of deep connection. They might idealize you, mirror your desires, or make you feel like the center of their world. This isn't passion in its purest form, it's strategic. The intensity is manufactured to bypass your defenses, making it harder to see the red flags that follow. As the relationship progresses, the dynamic often shifts. What once felt like devotion begins to feel like pressure. There may be unspoken rules when, how, and why intimacy happens. Deviating from these rules can result in punishment, silence, withdrawal, or subtle humiliation. You may begin to notice that sex is no longer a shared experience, but something that revolves around their needs, their preferences, and their timing. If you say no, you might be made to feel guilty or accused of being cold or withholding. If you express your own desires, they might be ignored, mocked, or used against you later. This is not passion, it's coercion disguised as closeness. But the heart of this behavior is not about wanting someone, but about needing to feel superior, in control, and emotionally untouchable. By using sex as a tool of power, narcissists maintain the upper hand in the relationship. They keep their partners unsure, off balance, constantly wondering what version of the person they'll meet next. One day, they're showering you with affection. The next, they're emotionally distant or even cruel. That unpredictability is part of the control. It creates a cycle of craving and deprivation that keeps you coming back for more, trying to earn the connection you once felt. This cycle becomes especially painful because it often mirrors real passion. The highs feel incredible, the attention, the intensity, the illusion of being desired more deeply than ever before. But these highs are not sustainable because they're not built on real emotional safety. They're engineered to keep you attached, not connected. In real passion, both people feel seen and safe. There's room for vulnerability, for changing dynamics, for emotional give and take. In narcissistic dynamics, there's only one emotional center, and it's not you. Eventually, you may start to notice how small you've become in the relationship, how your desires have shrunk, how your boundaries have blurred, how you've learned to anticipate moods and manage reactions just to keep the peace. The person who once seemed so passionate now feels possessive, moody, even cruel, and yet breaking away feels nearly impossible. That's the trap of control masquerading as passion. It conditions you to equate intensity with intimacy, to confuse being overwhelmed with being loved. Many people stay in these dynamics longer than they want to, not because they're weak, but because they're deeply hopeful. Hopeful that the passionate person they met in the beginning will return. Hopeful that if they just give a little more, understand a little better, or change just enough, they'll finally be loved the way they deserve. But in a relationship where control is the goal, change is not a two-way street. Your adaptability becomes part of their power. To reclaim your truth, you have to unlearn the lie that control is love. You have to remember what real passion feels like: grounded, reciprocal, kind. It doesn't punish, it doesn't push you to perform, it doesn't make you question your worth. Real passion isn't afraid of your no, doesn't collapse when faced with your needs, and doesn't demand that you disappear to maintain harmony. It invites your whole self, your voice, your feelings, your body, into the room. When you see the difference clearly, you stop chasing intensity and start choosing intimacy. And in that space, real passion, free of control, full of mutual care, finally has a chance to grow. Realization is the fuel that keeps a narcissist's inner engine running. And nowhere is this more apparent than in their sexual and romantic lives. While it may seem like they're confident, self-assured, even dominant in their desires, the truth underneath is far less secure. Their sexual behavior isn't just about pleasure or connection. It's a carefully designed strategy to secure external validation, to prop up a fragile sense of self that can't survive without constant reinforcement. And because sex is one of the most immediate and emotionally charged ways to feel seen, admired, and praised, it becomes one of their most relied upon tools. In the beginning, this can feel electric. The narcissist may go out of their way to make you feel like the most desired person in the room. They'll learn your preferences, compliment you constantly, and create an atmosphere of high emotional stakes. Their attention can feel intoxicating, like a spotlight you didn't know you needed until it found you. But that spotlight is double-edged. It's not really about you. It's about what your reaction says about them. Your desire becomes proof of their worth. Your praise is a salve to their insecurity. Your arousal is a mirror reflecting their self-image. But here's the catch. Validation, no matter how intense, never lasts. It wears off, and when it does, the narcissist begins seeking the next hit, like any other addiction. This might mean pushing boundaries to provoke stronger reactions, shifting personas to recapture novelty, or engaging in risky or manipulative sexual behavior. It's not about deepening intimacy, it's about raising the stakes to keep the supply flowing. Over time, the relationship starts to feel less like a partnership and more like a performance, with you as the audience, not the co-star. One of the most painful aspects of this dynamic is that it's deeply one-sided. While you may enter the relationship seeking mutual connection, emotional honesty, and shared joy, the narcissist is there for something else entirely, the fix. They might reward your compliments but ignore your needs. They'll bask in your admiration but withdraw the moment you express disappointment or ask for more. And when the validation dries up, when life gets messy, or you get tired, or you stop being quite so available, they may turn cold, punitive, or even cruel. Because it was never about you. It was about how you made them feel about themselves. This kind of validation seeking can also lead to a painful cycle of idealization and devaluation. In the early stages, you're idealized. Everything about you is amazing, sexy, special. But this isn't rooted in real appreciation. It's a projection. You're playing the role they need you to play to feel good about themselves. The moment you fall short of that role, by being human, by asking for reciprocity, by seeing through the performance, the pedestal crumbles, and so does the affection. Suddenly, the praise turns into criticism, the attention turns into neglect, and the person who once made you feel chosen now makes you feel invisible. This leaves many partners of narcissists confused and hurt, wondering what went wrong or what they did to cause the shift. But the answer lies in the narcissist's relationship with validation. Because their sense of self is externally sourced, they can never truly feel secure in love. They are only ever as good as their last compliment, last conquest, last affirmation. And when the attention fades, as it inevitably does in any long-term relationship, they panic. Rather than turning inward and building authentic self-worth, they turn outward and seek a new audience. The damage this causes in relationships is profound. It creates a sense of instability, of never being enough. You may feel like you're constantly performing, trying to keep their interest, keep them close, keep them from looking elsewhere. And even when you give everything, it's never quite satisfying. That's because the void they're trying to fill can't be filled by another person. Validation, no matter how consistent or loving, can't heal a wound that was never your responsibility in the first place. Understanding this pattern is a powerful step toward healing. It allows you to stop internalizing their dissatisfaction and recognize that their hunger for validation is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a symptom of their own emptiness. It helps you see the difference between being loved and being used to feel lovable. And most importantly, it gives you permission to step off the stage, to stop performing, and to start seeking relationships where you're valued not for what you provide, but for who you are. True intimacy doesn't require constant affirmation to survive. It grows in the quiet spaces where authenticity replaces performance, where being known is more important than being admired. In that space, validation becomes something mutual, not something extracted. And for those ready to leave the performance behind, that's where real connection begins. Vulnerability is the heartbeat of intimacy. It's what allows two people to truly see each other beyond roles, masks, or performances. But for narcissists, vulnerability isn't a bridge to closeness, it's a threat. It endangers the carefully constructed image they project to the world and exposes the raw, insecure parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime trying to hide. In a relationship, especially a sexual one, this aversion to vulnerability creates a dynamic that feels simultaneously close and emotionally distant. You may be naked together, but emotionally, they're behind walls you can't breach. At the core of this fear is a deep belief that being truly known will lead to rejection. To the narcissist, vulnerability equates to weakness, and weakness in their inner world is intolerable. Many narcissists develop their protective strategies early in life, often as a response to emotional neglect, criticism, or conditional love. They learned that showing their real self wasn't safe, so they built a false self, a persona polished to win approval, admiration, and control. In their adult relationships, this persona is the only version they feel comfortable offering. Letting that facade drop, even for a moment, feels like free falling into shame. This means that while they may crave connection, they can't allow themselves to fully participate in it. They might be physically close, sexually expressive, or even emotionally intense at times, but it's all within a tightly managed range. The moment things get too real, when you express your needs, reveal your pain, or ask them to meet you on a deeper level, they retreat, deflect, or attack. Vulnerability threatens their sense of superiority. It levels the playing field, and they can't tolerate that. To be vulnerable means admitting they're human, imperfect, maybe even hurt, and that is terrifying. You might notice this pattern over time. Whenever you try to deepen the emotional bond, they change the subject, grow cold, or even make fun of you. If you share something personal, they may respond with discomfort, sarcasm, or minimization. If you cry, they might go silent or accuse you of being too emotional. These are not just signs of emotional unavailability, they are acts of self-protection. For them, your vulnerability is a mirror, and mirrors are dangerous. They reflect what the narcissist is trying not to see, that relationships require mutuality, tenderness, and emotional presence. In sexual intimacy, this fear of vulnerability creates a disconnect. The narcissist might focus heavily on performance, technique, control, appearance, because it allows them to stay in the role of the great lover without actually opening up. Sex becomes more about image management than emotional connection. There may be passion, but there is rarely surrender. They may avoid eye contact, rush through moments of tenderness, or turn emotionally distant after sex. These behaviors are not random, they are avoidance mechanisms. Vulnerability lives in those in-between moments, the soft eye contact, the quiet afterglow, the gentle conversation, and those are the exact places they cannot safely go. For the person on the other side of this wall, the experience can be heartbreaking. You may feel like you're giving everything, your body, your heart, your truth, only to be met with a hollow response. You may sense that they're holding back, but can't understand why. You may start to believe that you're the problem, that you're asking for too much or feeling too deeply. But the reality is, you're asking for what intimacy naturally requires. You're asking to be let in, and the narcissist can't or won't open that door. This doesn't mean they're incapable of feeling. It means their emotional system is wired for protection, not connection. Vulnerability triggers an internal panic. Rather than risk being truly seen, they retreat to the safety of roles, control, or even cruelty. In doing so, they sabotage the very closeness they say they want. It's a painful paradox. They crave love, but reject the process required to receive it. Healing from a relationship like this often requires grieving not just the person, but the potential. The intimacy that never fully formed, the moments you hoped for but never received. It also means reconnecting with your own vulnerability, not as something to hide, but as your greatest strength. When you honor your need for emotional depth and authentic connection, you begin to attract relationships that value those qualities too. Real intimacy is built in the space where both people can show up without armor, where being seen is safe, where softness is not a weakness but a shared language. In that kind of relationship, vulnerability isn't something to fear, it's the very thing that makes love real.